Well, as expected, lots of comments coming through on Twitter about the impression of the police, what they think the police should do. And yes, indeed, it all keeps coming on. And you're going to ask a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question about the mode of recruitment. It used to be that the recommendations come from the community. I mean, they will say, okay, you go, and a certain letter is given to you to take to the recruitment center. Is that the situation now, or should it change? And we've talked about welfare.
Yeah.
But let's look at the recruitment process now.
It is still the same, you know, because it's done in every state of the federation. When it is announced, you are asked to go to a particular place to assemble, and then you need to arm yourself with a letter from perhaps a traditional ruler or from your local government council attesting to your integrity and that you come from that locality. And the assumption is that these people who are providing this attestation will do it in good faith. We will recommend the best qualified people who are ethically sound to enter this institution, which is a very important institution of state. But the reality, just with the way the value system in the country has gone under, is that these people are more likely to recommend who perhaps are related to them, or who children of friends or relatives are not really the best people in the community. And it does affect the quality and integrity of the people who come into the force. And you can't blame the police for that.
Staying with issues of recruitment, should there be, I asked you this earlier, should it be an annual process? I know in other climes, or in some climes, they have a permanent recruitment center. So at any time, anybody can walk in with the right papers and letters and all of that and go through a screening process, which is not rushed. Should you think that should be the case?
Well, I think there's something we need to understand here, which is the way police colleges in some parts of the world are run. For instance, in the case of the United States, which you might be alluding to, individuals actually pay to enter the training colleges and be trained for it and be available for recruitment. But in other places where it is centrally organized, where government has a key role in it, you tend to have a stated period for this recruitment, just like in the military, period of enlistment is announced. And I actually prefer the one where you have a designated period where this is done, because it is assumed that it will be based on thorough assessment of the needs of this institution, looking at the level of attrition within the year, looking at the vacancies available, and advertising for those positions where you actually need people. So it varies from one society or jurisdiction to another.
You know, many will always ask, what is it with uniformed men? Whether, not just the police now. We have some other ones, let me not use the name that's popping up in my head, how they describe some of them, even the ones set up by different states in the country. Their attitude is always as though they're there to hound the people, as though they are made for the law and not the law for them.
I think it has to do with the training and the training environment, and it's also something that was inherited from colonial rule that has not really changed. Because you ask yourself, when the first thing that is done to a recruit on entering the training institutions is to shave the person's head, which is to tell the person that, look, we're going to remove every information you came into this institution with and go through a process of indoctrination, which is actually what it is, to place country before self. They are also giving white uniform, which sometimes turns to brown because of absence of waters in some of these places. So that thing that is done within that 1 week sends a lot of messages to these people that you are now in an environment where you obey the last command, do what you are told to do. And when they come out of that, they have what we call police typical stereotype of themselves, that they are the law. You know, they are the representative of the law, and you do what they ask you to do. And if you don't do it, you'll be taken in for an offense.
You know, kind of training is, sorry, Chairman, the kind of training is another thing we have to look into critically. How do they have the same kind of training? We ask this because sometimes when you are in dire straits with maybe a police officer, a policeman, by the time you meet a very senior police officer to come into that same matter, is handled, you know, more professionally than when the man on the street, maybe the recruit, the constable. So what form of training do they have that would make one, you know, become more civil and the other one, well, harsh, brash, and so a couple of times?
Well, for a recruit, a constable, the average period of training is 6 to 9 months, where they basically go through a crash program of the criminal law, thought, musketry, handling of arms, and all that. So in 6 to 9 months, they are ready to be deployed. But the senior officers have years in service experience, have gone for management courses, have interacted with people at various levels of government and society, and through that have acquired a much more balanced perspective of life and society, and therefore in a better position to handle issues in a more balanced manner than a recently recruited officer. And that informs the difference between the attitude of what you call a patrol officer and an officer sitting in the office. Then the other one is also where they work. The patrol officer is often on the streets in the sun, encountering a different set of people, is also deployed to respond to criminal suspects. The officer sits in office where he meets people dressed the way you and I dress and have a different perspective of them. All those inform the way they respond. And you will expect, of course, a more experienced officer to handle issues in a more matured manner than a freshly recruited person or a frontline officer.
Can we properly, or to a large extent, reform the police to maybe a level that is appreciable if we don't decentralize the police force?
That's a good question. But my response, because I know where you're going, is that we also have police forces that are centralized in certain jurisdictions and societies that are much more disciplined, much more professional. So decentralization on its own doesn't come with a default disposition to maturity, discipline, and respect. Don't forget that actually the Nigerian police force started as a decentralized police force. You had the Southern Nigeria Police Force, you had the Northern Nigeria Police Force, you have native authority police forces, and the literature showed that those forces were not any better. In fact, they were much more politically influenced than we had now when we have a centralized police. So it doesn't come automatically. It's actually the institution itself, the level of professionalism, and the resources they have to really rein in the bad eggs in the force. And without that happening, if you like, you can divide them into 774 police officers, if you like. Every local government have a... It was not good. In fact, actually, if you look at it, because you also have to compare this with national agencies now and state agencies. Let's take, for instance, the Independent National Electoral Commission and the State Independent Electoral Commission. If you are to compare the two, which one is much more professional, which one is more disciplined? And that is how it's going to happen if you decentralize the police.
Because as it is, look at the police police stations. Not everybody, I mean, the average person wouldn't, if you tell him, look, let's go to the police, he'll tell you, look, what am I looking for in a police station? And some people tell you, no, I've never been there, I don't want to go there. And the only reason why some people go there, they've got a bad experience. But if you're talking about community level policing, when you want to encourage the community to come in, volunteer information and partner with the police, they need to be able to walk into their offices at any point in time and then go off. But the way it is now, that's not happening?
Yeah, there is no denying the fact that a certain level of decentralization will bring the police closer to the community, because if you have a state-level police force, it will of course recruit all its personnel from that state, and those recruited are more likely to be posted to communities where they come from or that are close to where they come from. But that is as far as it goes, because also in 1986 it was tried. People within the rank of superintendent of police and down were posted back to their home states. And most of them went back to inherit their family disputes and use their authorities to, join in all the community fights and struggles that they have. So it's not automatic. Actually, when I was in the student movement, in the 80s, when we were faced with the military government, part of the thing we said saved most of us is that we had national agencies, because if we had state-level ones, they perhaps would have pursued some of us to our families and harass our parents and relatives. So be careful about what you wish for.
No, but if you do that,
but it also worked in some instances. When you talk about the 80s, I also recall it was until they did that that the notorious armed robber Anini then was caught, because an indigene of that state was sent back home to clean up the mess, and he did well. So he is.
But it was also an indigene of that state that was protecting an enemy.
Beautiful. So that's why I'm saying that when we talk about the bad, we should also look at the good in it.
Yeah. So it balances out that if you have an indigene there, it could go either way. He could protect an indigene who is a criminal, or expose an individual who
doesn't it depend on the checks and balance that you put in place?
It comes back to resources and supervision, which the police doesn't have.
Supervision,
enough of.
very key.
Resources, because to whom a responsibility is given, there is also the need to give the person the resources. And when you give the person resources, it gives you a high moral ground to supervise them. What successive governments in Nigeria have struggled to do is that they can't in conscience say that they have adequately resourced the police. And hence they keep shying away from the supervision that is needed to be done. You have a Ministry of Police Affairs, you have a Police Service Commission. How much of the budget made for the police, or how adequate the budget they release to the police
is there bureaucracy too much?
Actually, there was a time we had a convening that looked at the oversight agencies on the police and the role that they are supposed to play. You look at the Ministry of Police Affairs, a whole ministry, all it does is budgetary oversight. Just collect the budget and give to the police. And over the years, in trying to create more job for itself, rather than hand out the money, decided to start spending the money, thereby complicating the problem.
Yeah. Then the Police Service Commission.
Police Service Commission is actually
a merger or a streamlining?
No, the Police Service Commission is actually the one that they constitutionally provided. It's a civilian oversight agency of the police, and its statutory duty are clear: recruitment, promotion, and discipline. But the police, the Police Affairs Ministry has come and gone because of this constant struggle of successive government about what their role is actually. What is it that they are supposed to do? And I hope that is one of the ministries that the present government may want to look at in terms of rationalizing.